We learned in school that the city of London, England is the largest city in the whole world. Maybe so, but it couldn't have been much bigger than Rutland. I need to tell you something. London, England is not the largest city in the whole world. It may have used to been, but it's not anymore. Do y'all know what the largest city in the world is?
Japan.
Who said New York? That is the largest city in America. Japan is a country. It's
Singapore.
No.
Tokyo. Texas.
Oh my God.
It's Mexico City. It's like 100 million people in Mexico City. Let's keep going. Early that morning, Mama got me up. She packed my food basket, so full you'd think nobody in Vermont had ate for a week. And this is it. Papa had gone to the barn to yoke Solomon to drive me to the tanner place. When Mama wasn't looking, Aunt Carrie slipped me the 10 cents. She still had it all knotted up in a clean white hanky. She wadded it so deep in my hip pocket, she halfway pushed my trousers down. "Don't lose it," she whispered to my ear. "Lose it? After all that wrapping, I'd be hoped to ever find it." "It's for a ride on the merry-go-round," she said, "and if you don't want to spend it, you can squirrel it away." Now, Aunt Carrie says you can, have it for a ride on the merry-go-round, or you can squirrel the money away. What is to squirrel something away?
Give it away.
It means to save it. Very good, very good. To make short of it, I got breakfasted and basketed and packed off to Tanner's. I never thought we'd get that far. Seems as though Solomon weren't near as hurried to see Rutland as I was. Maybe he already knew he wasn't going. "Papa," I said, "tell me about Rutland." "I never been." Neither had I, so there really wasn't much point in talking about it. A day or two ago, Papa as much as said to Mama that if he heard the word Rutland 3 more times, they're going to have to bring him to Brattleboro. That's where the crazies go. I guess when they go crazy. When I jumped out of the ox cart and Papa was turning Solomon for home, all he said to me was one word: manners. It sure wasn't far to Rutland, not the way those dappled gray horses of Mr. Tanner's moved that rig. They must have been barned all summer at the speed they trotted. Ben Tanner drove, and I sat between him and his wife, tight close, but it was all Miss Tanner and I could do to hold tight. "Hang on, Bess," said Mr. Tanner. We were off. His grays were called Quaker Lady and Quaker Gent. Other than the fact that one was a mare and the other a gelding, you couldn't tell them apart, except from the driver's seat when their tails were up. Boy, could they try. We passed so many other rigs on the way to Rutland, I lost count. They sure were a pair, and Mr. Tanner was as proud of that brace of grays as he was of Bob and Bill. He just cottoned the things in twos. I was about to ask him why he didn't keep a second Mrs. Tanner around somewhere, just as a matched pair to take out on Sunday, or why he didn't just wed twins. But I remembered manners and owned up to silence. "Never miss a chance," Papa had once said, "to keep your mouth shut." And the more I studied on it, the sounder it grew. We got to Rutland same time everybody else did. There couldn't have been nobody in Vermont who weren't there, and all dressed for Sabbath. Let's stop there. He says everybody at Rutland, at the Rutland Fair, was dressed for Sabbath. What does that mean, dressed for Sabbath? Say it again. She said all in black. It's nothing to do with Black Sabbath, but nice guess. I do appreciate it. Someone else. No one knows what does anyone know what the Sabbath is? Sabbath is the day of worship.
Oh.
So it was like everybody was dressed for church. They were all dressed up, wearing their nicest stuff, like at the Grove. It was some sight to see. Even before we got to the fairgrounds, please quit tapping. Even before we got to the fairgrounds, it reminded me of the story I heard about a man from Learning who had gone all the way to the city of New York. When he got back, folks all asked him what the city is like. All he said was, "There's so much going on at the depot, I never got to the village." I didn't know where the Rutland Depot was, but it seemed to be about everywhere. And we pulled up at the fairgrounds. I was feared to blink from missing some of it. First place we headed for was where the stock was bedded down. Mrs. Tanner and I looked for what she called a rest room. As it was still morning early, I wasn't of a mind to rest. But Miss Tanner sure was in a hurry for it. Bess was a big woman, and I never suspected she could cover so much distance in so short a time. We never did get to rest. All we did was find a pair of shanties, one marked ladies and the other one gents. I knew right off it had something to do with where Mr. Tanner was going to put up his team. Even had their names on the door, and I thought that was real fancy. I sort of looked around for a shanty that said Pinky on the door, as they sure did things up fine here in Rutland. But it seemed like Bess Tanner was still in a big hurry to rest. She mumbled something about riding that fast over those cuss bumps and what it did to her insides. Must have been the reason she was tired. Just before she pushed me through the gents' door, she whispered a word of warning about the place. Don't speak to a soul inside of there. You hear? Places like that are full of perverts. There wasn't much to do inside except take a leak, which I did. I looked around to see if I could spot me a pervert. As I was the only one in the place, there was no one to ask. I'd overheard Aunt Mattie say pervert to Mama or Aunt Carrie when they were talking. So I just figured that a pervert had something to do with grammar, or maybe it was something to do with a cornet. But if and there was a pervert in the place, they sure kept it hid. I sure hoped I'd see me one or two before we left Rutland, seeing as both Bess Tanner and Aunt Mattie were so keen on them. Mr. Tanner was outside, waiting for us. The next thing we did was go see Bob and Bib. Best part was that Pinky was close by, only one shed away. I jumped into her pen, put my arms around her neck, hugged her tight. Pinky, I said, we're at Rutland, ain't it grand? Right away quick, we got Bob and Bib yoked and bowed. Bob was always left, Bib right. We went across an open show area where some men were exercising some big horses with hairy hoofs to find a photographer. We spent the better part of an hour getting our picture took. The man who owned the camera got up under a big black tent. His wife held a funny G-jaw up in the air. Looked like some sort of snow shovel to me. But it was the first snow shovel I ever see explode. You never see such a bang of light on a cloudy day in your life. What is this explosion made by this snow shovel looking thing? It's the flash, yeah. So now, we just have these things on our phones with the cameras and the flashes. They used to have a separate camera that was like huge, literally, and a flash that was, this big round thing the size of a snow shovel, and it go. So that's what this bang of light. He obviously has never seen that. I never saw the World War, but it must have been like that. I almost jumped out of my boots. Bob and Bib didn't take kindly to it either. They backed into me, started fighting the yoke. I tried to still them, but I couldn't see. When the snow shovel went off, I was looking right at it, and it was the last thing I saw for quite a spell. It was a tribulation to me, too, because we come to Rutland to see a lot more than a fool snow shovel go off. It come time to show the oxen. You should have seen them, big as August 1st. Mr. Tanner nodded to a yoke of Herefords, said they'd weigh up about a ton each. Will Bob and Bib get that big? I asked. Bigger, on account that Bob and Bib are Holstein. They're the biggest and the best. I sure was proud to hear that. Even prouder when we went to the ox pull. When there was a pause in the contest, the man who was talking through a big thing on his mouth that made his voice louder called out Mr. Tanner's name. Exhibition only and not for sale from the town of Learning. A perfect yoke of matched yearlings by name of Bob and Bib, owned by Mr. Benjamin Franklin Tanner, and worked in the ring by Mr. Robert Peck. That was my cue to take Bob and Bib around the ring 3 times and then out. But I couldn't move till Mr. Tanner gave me a healthy prod in the backside with his goat and said, "Get!" There I be, me, at Rutland Fair, marching around a big sawdust ring with all the people clapping their hands and pointing at Bob and Bib. Made my heart pound so hard I felt I was going to pump right out there in the ring. I was wishing that Mama and Aunt Carrie and Papa could see, Pinky too. It was sinful, but I wanted the whole town of Learning to see me just this once. If only Edward Thatcher could see, and Jacob Henry, and Becky Tate. Parading my oxen around the ring and listening to the people clapping made me squint my eyes up tight. I could see all the folks I knew sitting there in those big circles of seats. Manners, I said to myself, walked real tall. It was just like I was somebody. A man leaned over the fence, said to me, "What's their line, boy?" "Out of Apron, Mr. Tanner's prize milker," I said. "Zyrebull was his too." "Beowulf?" "Yes, sir." After 3 times around the ring, I touched Bib lightly on his right ear with my wand. The 2 little oxen made a smart left turn, we went through the gate. People were still clapping and yelling. Some even followed us along, asking questions about Bob and Bib as we walked them back to their shed. Somehow, Bess Tanner was not about in the crowd. I figured she was probably taking another rest. I'd given her up for gone when I looked up, and here she was coming on a dead run. I could just see the top of her head and her big floppy hat with all the flowers on it that weren't real. Between her and us, there was a passel of people that just seemed to melt out the way from Mrs. Tanner. She was so short of breath when she got to us, she couldn't talk. She needed a rest for sure. I kind of hoped that maybe she finally spotted a pervert and was just itching to tell folks. "Quick," she said to me between her wheezes. "The 4-H club men are judging the stock that the children raised up." "Hogs?" said Mr. Tanner. "No, they're looking the calves right now, but the hogs are next. I'll pin up the oxen. You take Rob with you, because I can't run another step in these shoes." "Let's get Pinky," said Mr. Tanner, and we were off. Over in the next shed, most of the stock was gone. Pinky was almost the only pig there. We threw the bars open on her pen and were just about to drive her out. That's when I noticed that she'd been rolling in something that wasn't very clean. On her left shoulder and flank, she had a big dung stain. Do y'all know what dung is? Poop, yeah, feces. The rest of her was so clean, thanks to Mr. Tanner's stockman, that the dirty spot stuck out like a mean tongue. I went down on my knees, get this, I went down on my knees and attacked the dirt with my hands and my fingernails. It not only looked bad, but it stunk worse. Strong smell of its freshness made my eyes sting, like Alyssa when she farts. "Boy," said Mr. Tanner, "that ain't no way to wash a pig." "What a washer?" "Same thing as washes a pig and a dirty boy. Soap and water. Find soap, I'll find a bucket, and we're in business." I must have turned Rutland upside down trying to find some soap. I finally saw a bar of saddle soap in a tack room and made for it. But a man saw me and he said, "Hey! Soap!" I said. "I'll buy your soap. My pig's dirty. The 4-H are judging and we'll miss out. Here, all I got's 10 cents. It's in this hanky. You can have it all." I put the hanky with Aunt Carrie's dime inside it, into his hand, grabbed the soap, ran out the door. The man just couldn't say a word. There went my ride on the merry-go-round, into a bar of soap. But I was too rushed to care. Mr. Tanner had a rag, and in no time I got Pinky clean as Christmas. Most of the water I managed to get on myself, and I was soaked through, and there was so much stink still on my hands in spite of all the soap and water that I figured I'd never be able to eat a noon meal. Mr. Tanner said that I took too long putting a scrub to Pinky and that we'd never make it in time, but we did. The kids were walking around an open ring, and each one had a pig. One boy had a real good to look at Poland China, as white as Pinky, but not as big. A girl who was taller than I was had a spotted Poland. A boy with red hair and lots of freckles had a fine-looking Hampshire. It was coal black, with a white belt around it at the shoulder. Had it been a calf, it could have been a sister to Bob and Bib. Some of the pigs were acting up a bit, not staying in line, squealing all the time they was handled by the 4-H judges. The circle was just about whole when we got there, and Mr. Tanner almost threw me and Pinky into it as another man closed at the gate. My face was wet with the sweat of hurry. It feels worse, Papa always said, than the sweat of work. I didn't have a hanky to use, so I just stood there. I put my hand on my brow, and right then and there, I got such a whiff of pig manure I thought I'd pass out. Everything I ever ate went sour and wanted to come up my gullet. The judges were coming my way, but it just didn't matter. All the noise of Rutland Fair and all the music and dust of the place just seemed to float off in a big whirly dream. I didn't need a ride on a merry-go-round, as all of Rutland was spinning about my head and taking me with it. One of my eyes sort of closed shut, but the one that was part open got a quick look-see at a judge putting something on Pinky, something blue. When my whole entire world was green, I couldn't have cared. I just couldn't have cared they'd put a pig sticker in both of us. The judge said something to me, and that's when I did it. I just leaned my head over, pointed my face at all the little square chips of sawdust, and threw up. Some of it even went on the judge's shoe. The merry-go-round went a whole lot faster, and I'd have fall off for certain, but some big, strong hands reached out and caught me, or over I'd have gone. "He's my charge," I heard Mr. Tanner say. "I'll take him." Next thing I knew, we were all back at Pinky's pen. I was lying in fresh straw just beside it. Pinky was inside. Mr. Tanner was standing close by, and Mrs. Tanner was washing my face with a clean towel. "How could you let him get so dirty?" was all she seemed to say to her husband. Mr. Tanner bit down and put his hand under my chin. Rob, how do you feel? Hungry, I said. Look, he said, pointing at Pinky's neck. Just look there. It was a blue ribbon, and on it, in gold letters, it said, First prize for best behaved pig. Just about noon, he said. Let's all put on the feed bag. What say, Bessie? Bess Tanner just sighed. Start without me. I don't want to put anything on right now. I just want to take off this cussed corset.